Hello and welcome back to all of my subscribers. If you are new or haven't yet done so, please consider subscribing to my channel, and if you like the video and appreciate the information, feel free to like, share and comment. So, what are we going to do today? Well, we are going to talk about what has happened that is significant recently, as well as where I believe things are going to go in the not too distant future. So a few videos ago I mentioned that I thought we here in New Zealand were not immune to the effects of the system reset that is happening. Well, given what has happened, perhaps not immune is a bit lenient, as now it appears that not only are we not immune, but we may indeed be the first to fully realize this new system. There is a real danger that before this current government is out of power, that we will already be there. So where is there? Well, I put what I'm talking to about in the title of my last video, and a third of the people that usually see my videos saw it. So let's avoid certain words and hope we can reach more people. For the purposes of this video, let's call it global reorganization that is being led by the World Economic Forum. So while we have everyone here, we're going to start right now by giving you a look into tomorrow's world, and before that, tomorrow's New Zealand. And some of you will think, oh, this could never happen and that is conspiracy theory, but to those of you who think I'm wrong, go ahead and tell me in the comments, or just wait until time proves me right. So, you wake up, suddenly you live in the world of tomorrow. This could happen by the end of next year, or in 5 years, or in 10 years, but this is where I see things going. So I want you to imagine, if you will, that you woke up tomorrow and went to work. You work in the same industry that you do now, and you earn the same salary, but with that amount of money you can only buy half as much as you can right now. Say you earn $100,000 New Zealand, which would put you in the lower middle class currently in New Zealand, which with the current exchange rates is about 61,400 American. Now imagine with that you can only purchase what you could if you had half of it, and then take out of that rent 60% of that, a rideshare lease agreement another 5%, and yes, that is like there's 2 or 3 cars for your street and you all pay a little bit and arrange between yourselves who gets to use them, where and when. Nobody owns it, and so the costs are ongoing and never ending. Most people on your street work from home. Public land does not exist, so no one owns their house or their own computer or anything for that matter. Everything is rented, everything is subscription based, and the subscriptions you need to have a house over your head and heat in your house and or to move around and do your job costs you roughly 90% of all the money you make from your job. The other 10% is all you have left for food. Most people have services like My Food Bag delivering them food daily, but the quality and quantity has been dropping steadily for the last few years. Now, meat is only included once a week, and if you're very lucky it'll be chicken or beef, but mostly it's mixed meat patties, which are about 80% cricket or mealworm. The rest of the week it's plant-based proteins. Things have become so bad that now you walk over to your local river to get some water, if you are fortunate enough to live anywhere near fresh water source, because the water that comes from your taps has a cost per litre attached, and if you use too much you can't afford food for one day of the week. So you walk at 3 AM to get water, and if you're caught, you know the fine you'll pay will mean you won't be eating for 2 or even 3 days of the week. Your money is no longer sent to you. It is stored on the blockchain and is a central bank digital currency that gets direct debited before you even see it for all of your ongoing bills. There is no choosing what you spend it on. If you are one of the few that does not use any My Food Bag subscription, you can go to the local supermarket, albeit the wait to get inside is long to discourage your choice. But what you buy is strictly controlled. You have a carbon limit. If you've had no meat at all the last week, your carbon limit will allow you to buy about 1 kilo of beef. But if you get that, you can't afford anything else. So you opt for 100 grams and a few other plant-based proteins and some other food-based products that give you the semblance of choice. You mutter to yourself in the supermarket how wrong this is and how much you don't like the control. Immediately, you are fined a third of the digital currency money you have for violating the government's hate speech law and can no longer even get the 100 grams of beef you wanted. Now, this all seems crazy, and you wonder how anyone could ever let this happen. Then you remember that the vaccine we were all forced to take all those years ago, and how at first there was limited side effects and some people died of myocarditis, and then as things started to get harder and protests and unrest broke out, the police and governments authorized use of a gas compound that targeted those who had taken the vaccine, and if you breathed in the gas, you died. After a few protests were ended via this method, those that had the will to protest were dead. And so the protest ended and the full out-and-out slavery ensued. Now, obviously, this has been abolished. Yes, that's right, I made it up. But think to yourself, given that what you have seen and what has happened this year, is this crazy dystopia a possibility? It's far worse than what George Orwell wrote about in his novel 1984, isn't it? Look around. How many of you are concerned it could actually happen? Now, I want you to think back, if you will, just 5 or 6 years ago. How many of you would have thought, rubbish, I would never pay for music more than once. If I buy a CD or a digital album, it's mine, right? Who thought you would rent it from Spotify? Think about your TV. Did you have DVDs for movies and buy series on disc? Who thought, oh no, I'll rent the right to watch this for a few limited amounts of time from Disney, Amazon or Netflix, etc. And look around at yourself. Who has those services or multiple of those services? How much share of your collective wallet are you spending each month to rent the right to watch the shows you want to watch? Who has HelloFresh or MyFoodBag? Have you noticed any shrinkflation in the food portion sizes? That's a genuine question, as I don't use those services, but I would be interested to know. Maybe someone in the comments can let me know. How many of you lease your car instead of own it? Do you have your phone or a hire purchase? Who had items on hire purchase or lease to own or even a mortgage? If you kind of own your house. A couple of decades ago, people did not pay for their houses for the whole lives. 30-year loans that are refinanced to keep you liquid just didn't happen. Just think about it. It's already happening. The whole world is trying to get share of your wallet. They don't want you to buy and own. They want you to spend a few dollars a week on as many different things to get that share of wallet ongoing. When you first leave school and get your first job, the bank immediately tries to give you an overdraft or a credit card. They want to get you accustomed to being in their pocket and dependent. For us to get free of what is coming, this is one of the things we need to change. If consumers en masse were to withdraw their support for any subscription-based model, we would crash these out of the market. But we all need to declare we won't pay little by little or borrow for anything. And given the inflation pressures, that is becoming harder and harder to do so. Please leave me a comment and let me know what you thought of this opening vision for things to come if we stay on the path. Okay, so let's move on. Now let's look at fact, not fiction. Let's get into today's content and take a look at some of the things that have happened both here in New Zealand and perhaps around the world if we have time. I want to let you know I'm not a financial advisor. I don't condone violence, nor do I advocate anything except for getting yourself prepared for what is coming in the short term, in the hope of avoiding a long-term SHTF, or perhaps just to survive it with some freedoms in place. Also, I want to make these videos a bit shorter and more frequent, so I will try to split things up and get things made a bit quicker for you all. I do apologize for the wait time. To do this, I just need your support in the form of subscribing to my channel. The more subscribers, the more, let's say, incentive I have. So, up first, today we are looking local. We are looking at the developments in Three Waters legislation that is coming to New Zealand. But to do this effectively, we need a brief overview of the Treaty of Waitangi. This is mostly for those of you outside of New Zealand, as the treaty is covered in our schooling to a point. The Treaty of Waitangi was signed on the 6th of February in 1840. It was signed at a time when Maori did not have nationhood status, and the land was in danger of being annexed by the French. 5 years before the signing, a Declaration of Independence was created and signed and then accepted by the British Parliament. So in effect, New Zealand was a sovereign nation for about 5 years only. Before that point, it was land that had native occupants on it, but it was not a country. When the Treaty of Waitangi was signed, there were two versions. One was the British. It said effectively Maori give sovereignty to the Crown in exchange for protection against being annexed by another empire. The Maori version said the Maori give governance to the British but retain their sovereignty. It should be noted that the Maori only signed the Maori version of this. Despite the signing of the treaty first in 1840, the Maori land wars raged on right up until the 1870s. This was because principally Maori had to sell the land to the Governor-General, who then on-sold it to European settlers. But when they did so, they failed to recognise that this sale was permanent and not just a governance over that piece of land. Now, this has been dramatically shortened because it's a bloody long and complex thing to cover, and it's not the focus of the video. With that said, these differences are what led to what is happening today. One notable thing though, is that the treaty also gave the Maori the same rights and privileges of British citizens, but it did not give more. In the years from 1872 to 1992, there are areas where the Maori believe the Crown breached the treaty. But since the British or the Crown are working from the English version and the Maori are working from the Maori version, which is different, there is debate. What is not up for debate is that the Maori were here before the British. But they are not indigenous, which makes the Maori an earlier group of settlers. They also decisively lost the land wars to the British, who had a more developed sense of imperialism and superior weapons and numbers. Settlements therefore are done in good faith by the Crown and can be labelled as cultural redress. But because the Maori lost the land wars, and the wars took place even after the treaty was signed, this was kind of, well, a stupid decision on the part of the British. But what should have happened is a Declaration of Independence and a New Zealand document of formation should have been signed later in 1888. Another notable event occurred in 1846, where the British government declared that the Maori land was to be registered, and that's all Maori land, and all other land or surplus unused land was to become Crown land. That is the basis for a lot of this redress. Now, the treaty did say that the Maori were to retain governance over the lakes and rivers on their land, or feeding their land, but it did not say Maori had governance or co-governance over all waters, and that brings us to where we are going to talk about what is happening now. Now, personally, I would like all of us to forget the treaty as if it didn't work then when it was written, nor did it work during or after the wars, And since no Maori are alive today when it was first written and signed, nor do British still live from 1840, I think we should have scrapped the whole damn thing long ago and said this is public land, this is private land. We are one country, one people, and we are all born here, so what is the use for division by race? Anyway, on to Three Waters. Well, that has just become five waters. Those being drinking water, storm water, wastewater, coastal water, and geothermal water. Most people only know about the first three, but after the bill passed its first reading on the 9th of June this year, these amendments were added. 5 days ago, on Friday, it's passed its second reading with these amendments in place, meaning once it passes its third reading, it will become law. One of the notable amendments, besides expanding Three Waters to Five Waters, was the effectual co-governance amendment that was added, and that was said to satisfy the Maori concept of te mana or te wai. Loosely translated and paraphrased, it says, we the Maori believe we have a special relationship with water, and because of this, Maori or iwi get to make binding dictations to water entities. Water is something we all have a special relationship with. Since every living thing on this planet needs water to survive, the claim that it is more special to Maori is downright insulting. So yes, these five waters, which basically are all except for rain, and let's not forget they already have a say over lakes and rivers, but the public infrastructure entities that will be established and funded by you paying a tax on your water. Although that's not expressly stated, I believe it is coming, and that's why you're getting those water meters added to your house that no one wanted or asked for. But yes, follow me here. Those public infrastructure entities will be dictated to by your local iwi oligarchs, and what they are told to do by them is binding, so they will have to do it. So if they say you have to pay 10 cents per litre of water you use to drink, 5 to flush, 7 to shower, pay a levy to go to the beach, and a levy to use geothermal water to produce electricity, you, me, and every company will have to pay it. Now, that basically gives Maori sovereignty over water in New Zealand. Not just on their land, but all water. It was extended to add geothermal and coastal on its scope also, as I mentioned before. The Prime Minister has come out with what could be interpreted as, well, just lies, saying the reference to the wording or to coastal water was aimed as a reference for the simple fact that if you pump wastewater into coastal water, it affects the coastal water, and a similar statement about geothermal and returning geothermal water from a power station back into a lake. And it is true, most certainly it happens around Auckland and most of the Wellington for the wastewater, and then Taupo and Rotorua for the geothermal. Which does bring up the point as to why, in reference to the wastewater, why they exit it right onto the beach and not right at the edge of New Zealand's exclusive economic zone, miles and miles and kilometres out into the ocean, with a no fishing barrier of 20 kilometres anywhere where wastewater is dumped. Stupid, I know, but hey. So, in effect now, Three Waters legislation that was sold as a way to keep rates low basically is a treaty settlement. But it goes further than that. Now think of the greater impacts that this will have. Farmers will have to pay the council rates, the government taxes, and the Maori water rights bills. Our government thinks we're all oblivious idiots, and the whole concept of co-governance just means, in effect, the Maori iwis are going to be like another regulated government. How long before they demand the right to tax like our Crown government does? I think it's coming, and I, for one, see a return of the land wars. Because I can't see the people accepting more control and taxation than what we already have, and it's already far too much. If anything, we want less taxation, less control, but since we are the test case for the global economic reorganization, and they want to see just how far they can push before we stop understanding, and I believe that tipping point is fast coming, I think we will all find out sooner rather than later. Okay, well, that was a bit longer than I wanted to spend on that, but I believe it was necessary because of the grievous ramifications it could have once it's passed. And yes, it is an inevitability at this point because Labour has a dictatorship, and because of its waka jumping laws on its own members, they can't oppose anything and all have to vote as a bloc, which right then and there nullifies our democracy, right? The point of a democracy is that not one party or one sole leader has all of the power. It's so they don't. It's so they need numbers to pass legislation democratically. But as our system stands, Jacinda says, I want to pass this, and if any of her party do not vote yes, they're just fired with no repercussions. It's basically a staged game of Simon Says right now. I have a question for all New Zealanders. If we need a referendum to decide if weed should be legal or if we should change the flag, why the hell don't we need a referendum on co-governance or giving the Maori minority sovereignty over all water? So as I said at the beginning, I'm going to try and make shorter videos, ones that span one or two topics, but more of them more frequently. So I'm going to end this video here today with that thought for you all to ponder, and I'm going to try and get another one of these done without the amount of time waiting for the next video as being so long. If you liked my topics and video today, please like, comment and share and subscribe. I will see you all again very soon.